Now let's talk about the visas that have been a problem for Indians who are traveling to various parts of the world, particularly in Canada, where protests and tensions have been mounting as Indian students take to the streets to protest against the country's new immigration laws. There are as many as 70,000 students that fear deportation who moved mainly from the state of Punjab to the North American country with dreams and aspirations for a better life for themselves and their generations to come. The students are protesting against the recent changes in federal immigration policies and are going on hunger strikes, carrying out rallies to protest against Justin Trudeau's government's decision to limit study permits and reduce permanent residency nominations. Students are setting up encampment and organizing rallies in various provinces, including in Prince Edward Island, Ontario, Manitoba and British Columbia. Advocacy groups such as the International Sikh Student Organization argue that these issues stem from broader policy failures rather than the influx of international students. The ongoing protests show that growing desperation amongst international students who feel they are being unfairly targeted by the government. Having heavily invested in their education and the Canadian economy, these students are now being told to complete their studies and return home, all the while grappling with substantial debt. While protests in Canada continue and seem to be glimmers of hope of Justin Trudeau coming back to power, the real question lies of the invaluable contribution of Indian students and the Indian nationals living and working in Canada, and if it would truly be fair for Canadian administration to now deport students that risked assets, took debts and gave their all to the nation which no longer wants them. Let's start our conversation on the telecast with me, my panelists, and let's have Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor on the and understand from him what he thinks of this immigration problem, which is not just peculiar to Canada, but it has also been witnessed in United Kingdom. It has also been witnessed in United States of America. So what is ailing the West that they have played the protectionism card and disallowed immigrants to come into their countries?
Well, thank you, Megha. And there is a general, wave sweeping through a lot of the Western countries to limit their immigration because of various issues. One of the topmost issues in that is that of refugees and asylum seekers, and those are mostly from the Islamic countries, and the terrorism which has increased manifold in those countries. So those are very legitimate concerns. So what is happening is that initially there is some sort of a extreme reaction because a lot of the crimes are being committed by the recent immigrants. So they tend to clamp down on all immigrants or most immigrants, and then slowly they will have to calibrate and reconsider their policies and review their policies. But to take such extreme steps of asking the students who are already there to go back, etc., that is not warranted, and that will, I guess, the government will have to agree that they have to, modify their approach so that they don't impact the people who are already there if they are particularly engaged in legitimate activities of education or study or are doing some jobs for which they have got correct documents and proper procedures have been followed. So then to say that you have to go back is not appropriate and not correct.
Okay.
And visas are the internal matters and rights and responsibilities of the host country. So going ahead, they can exercise more caution and more checklists and more all the screening procedures which are required. But for those who are already there, they have to be a little more circumspect. Back to you, Megha.
Professor Madan Alapat, how do you view this very tightened visa policies that have been now implemented in some of the biggest Western economies? Now, what does it say about the debt crisis they have been facing? There have been a number of these anti-immigration rallies and protests that have been taking place on the streets of United Kingdom and other parts of the world. What does this indicate, and how is it that India is going to cope with these, keeping in mind there is a significant chunk of Indian nationals who travel abroad, study over there, decide to build their homes for generations to come?
Well, Megha, I concur largely with what Ambassador Kapoor said. And frankly, I'm glad that Justin Trudeau, to an extent, appears to be cleaning up his act. He was cleaning up his act, and as a consequence, he lost the support of a party that basically has the leader who's extremely radical and who's totally anti-India. So from that point of view, it is a reality that many people come on student visas and then they do all kinds of odd jobs, and many of them get involved in criminal activities as well. So I'm not saying all the students, I'm not saying most of the students, but I'm saying some students. So I think the Canadians are now looking at filtering the process better, as Ambassador Kapoor very correctly said, and I think that is going to play out. We must remember, Megha, that there is a backlash against immigration all over the world. In Germany, for example, the Alternative für Deutschland, the so-called extreme right-wing party, has got a large number of seats in the two state elections that just took place. And Scholz's party had a miserable performance along with his partners, the Green Party. But there is a huge reaction, and I think a lot of the reaction is driven by exactly what the ambassador said, the fact that a lot of extremists and radicals are coming using the student visa route. There's no intention of studying anything, frankly, and then going on to crime and other activities. Now, so long as Justin Trudeau is providing shelter to them, they had a pathway to even to citizenship or to permanent residency while they were doing their nasty work. And you have seen, for example, how Justin Trudeau completely was oblivious to the situation in India, where the people whom he was nurturing in Canada were indulging in extreme acts of violence in India. But the fact is that violence and extremism are inadmissible. And in India, for example, I'm sure we'd use the same yardstick. I'm glad the Canadians are finally cleaning up their act, because after all, it's overall a very good country. And finally, those Indians who are moderate, those Indians who are not extremist, who are not prone to violence, and that's the overwhelming majority of Indians who are migrating to these countries, whether UK, US, Canada, Australia, wherever. Which is why I think more and more the moderate, modern Indians are being welcomed. And I think this is going to happen in Canada as well, Megha.
Okay, that's also reflective because of the promise that has been made by Donald Trump during his campaigning. And Rabinder Sachdev, he speaks about how he promises green cards for Indian graduates getting degrees from American universities, making quite the observation saying that the Indian graduates who study from America return to India and then become billionaires.
He's very right. In fact, there's often been for the last 20 years, a thought that the minute you do a master's program in the US, a green card should be stapled to your passport, right? So that has been definitely a point, and America is built upon talent. That is the beauty of, let's say, diversity and immigration, which built America where it is. So America, in an overall sense, understands the value. But again, the question is, as Ambassador Kapoor, as Professor Nalapad have said, is partly the quality. The quality of the talent that you attract. However, at the same time, all economies, including these economies and also economies of, let's say, the East, Korea, Japan, they need labor also. Okay, and yes, there are proper labor workers who are going, who fulfill, much needed economic or social needs in these countries. The issue is that, having the right mindset of the folks who go, that's one. At the same time, in the case of Canada, for example, it's not only the Indian students who are definitely, many of them are going just to get out of India, just be there, do whatever, make a life there, whatever. But private universities in Canada have also been complicit in this game. They've been issuing visas for diploma programs of 6 months or 9 months in, something or the other, marketing, so to say. You get a diploma and they're, charging their fees. And what's been happening in Canada is that the Canadian universities are in a way franchising their courses to these shops, who in turn are issuing visas, and that becomes a good route for students to go, or whoever wants to kind of land up in Canada. Now that said, yes, there is overall a trend, be it in US, even Canada, even Australia, even UK, even all of them are in a way recalibrating the total numbers they need. From what I see is happening, each one of these countries, look at Australia also, I think they've come up with specific numbers now. They're saying we need only these numbers per year and these categories.
Right.
Similarly, the UK is doing that, and similarly, that's what Canada is saying. Canada has, I think, about 700 or so or 1,000 international students as of now, which contributes maybe around $40 billion or more to the annual economy. But they're saying they'll bring down this number to 360,000 or so. Right. So all of these countries are recalibrating the numbers of the people in a scientific way. By the way, these are the numbers which are going down, but the numbers are opening up in Korea and Japan. In Korea and Japan, the numbers are opening up.
Exactly.
So
yes.
there is good scope for some folks out there.
Interesting. Particularly again, how do we view this? Is this a mixed bag for us? Should Indians be rejoicing? If one door closes, there are several other that open, as Robinder Sachdev pointed out, in Southeast Asia. Are Indians going to very fast recalibrate and go to greener pastures?
Megha, there would always be a section of Indians who would prefer to stay back and build the country. And there would be some who would try to get the first flight wherever they can. Frankly speaking, I believe that most of the countries have their own right to decide who they want to give visa or not. I have studied abroad like many others, and I don't consider Canada as a country which has premium universities and its quality is that something. And I neither believe that those who go there are the best of the scholars. So I have very little sympathy for them. Even if you go for studies, you can't hold a placard that just because I've come to study here, I need to be given a PR status and I will live for eternity here. You have gone to study there, it's your choice. And if your education is completed, if the government of that country decides that you should go back, then you should go back. Secondly, if we say that we are a $4 trillion economy, then it ultimately has to be built by Indians. You cannot have this culture that people are running away and seeing that, oh, which country I should go and take the labor class job, and then I would protest that I need more than this. Frankly speaking, neither India would allow Bangladeshis or the Sri Lankans unlimited access to work in India. So if countries like Canada or the Western economies today are creating restrictions, as an Indian, I would say they have absolute right to do that. Whether it benefits or doesn't benefit a section of Indians, that's none of their concern. And I think it's not my concern either. As an Indian, I have studied abroad, I've come back, and my country has given me enough opportunities. I had to go through a lot of hardships, and I'm proud that I had to go through those hardships because it has made me evolve in what we are. So frankly speaking, the Western Europe is having its own crisis. Canada, in spite of all the claims, has its own crisis. And Canada, by the way, in spite of the size of the country, a very small portion of the country is where you can actually reside. So they have a huge housing problem there.
Yeah.
So ultimately, every country is first of all accountable to their own people and not to those immigrants coming. But fundamentally, is it going to solve the problems? No. Most of the people from India who are going on legal visas. The problem of Western Europe or Canada and even of United States is illegal immigrants. So illegal immigrant problem doesn't get solved by restrictions on visa of those who come to study.
Okay.
Eventually, by checks and mesh balances, I think Canada cannot completely do away with the students coming because it contributes to a significant proportion of their economy. But I think eventually the illusion of certain states specifically and people of certain states, with all due respect, that I would go and eventually even if I become a driver, I should become a non-resident Indian. That perception has to go. Punjab is a beautiful state, a wonderful state. It eventually has to be built by people from Punjab. If there are restrictions, I'm happy that they should stay back and build their state, which is one of the finest states of the country.
Okay, that brings me to another point of conversation. And Ambassador Kapoor, then, it puts more stress, builds pressure on the country's resources, which are already overstretched, keeping in mind the kind of education that is provided, which is below par. I think the number of unskilled graduates that are getting their degrees from these graduation and post-graduation colleges are larger in number. The skilled labor is minuscule. There is a demand, but supply for those quality educated graduates is very low, which then gives us a huge chunk of millions and millions of these youth, which should be our superpower, but we are somehow not able to fit them in the ecosystem to generate income, to provide jobs, and also to build the economy, which aims to be the third largest in the coming years.
Thank you, Megha. You have outlined the issue extremely well. Now, let me just analyze it both ways. We have the Indian demographic situation where we are almost touching 1.5 billion. We are the maximum population country in the world. And the jobs which are available to that sort of population is not commensurate with the amount of people who are applying for those jobs. So, from that perspective, there is demography, there is the youth, the age of the population on our side. We are a very youthful country. More than 65% of the people in India are less than 35 years of age. So, there are a lot of positives. But at the same time, if we analyze it historically, the initial 20 million people who had gone outside India had managed to create a GDP in those countries that they had migrated, which was equal to about almost a billion Indians in India. So the contribution that they make to the world, to those countries where they are migrated and to India is very, very phenomenal, because they send remittances, they invest in India, and many of them also after some time start coming back to India. That's why when the issue of brain drain was a very important issue for the policymakers in India, one of the advisors to the Prime Minister at that time said that, Madam, if we try to stop the brain drain, the brain will be in the drain. So we have to stop that also from happening, that the brain is in the drain, but that brain drain ultimately becomes brain gain for India. Because you have a lot of good quality people who then come back to the country, and we have an example here in this panel itself of Karthik coming back to India and working in India. So that helps the country in a very big way. Now the diaspora in these countries, for example, if I am in US or UK or Australia or Canada or any other country, West Asian country, the Indian diaspora is in very, very significant numbers, firstly. Secondly, the local leaders, the prime ministers, the presidents, the policymakers in those countries realize that the Indian diaspora is contributing economically very, very significantly. They are the highest per capita ethnic earning group in many of these countries. They are the highest taxpayers. They are the greatest creators of jobs, of employment. They are the greatest creators of startups. They are the greatest creators of unicorns. They are law-abiding. There are hardly any Indians in jail in the US if I scan the entire population. So every way the society is realizing that the positive contribution, they are net contributors, whereas some of the other ethnic groups are, negative in that contribution aspect, in the sense that they expect and get and demand much more from the system in terms of the taxpayers' money and resources which are utilized for them for their upkeep.
Right.
Whereas the Indians are just contributing very, very significantly. They are also the most educated ethnic group in most countries. So in every way, a lot of these countries are realizing that the Indian diaspora is a very useful diaspora, a very useful resource, and so it is being welcomed more and more in contrast to many other ethnic groups which are not as easily welcomed. So you find Indians in very important position also,
yes,
as prime ministers, as vice presidents,
yes,
as leaders. Yes.
Yes.
Back to you, Mike.
So Professor Nalapat, how do we find a solution to this problem that has ailed us for several decades now. And we were speaking about brain drain, and it had been going on for decades together. Now there is this new resurgence of an India that people are confident about and proud about as well. But how do we move from the theory of it and galvanizing in it, but at the same time then moving forward and executing it and implementing it? Because today I as the executive editor of my channel, and when looking to hire and building teams, I get hundreds and hundreds of CVs, and unfortunately they're all postgraduates and undergraduates, and they've completed their education and they've interned in some of the organizations, but the quality that they bring to the table is extremely low. So I have to cherry pick, and from, like, say, hundreds, I'm only picking, I don't know, 4 or 5 of them, which is abysmal rate.
Well, Megha, it's a very important question you have raised, and as far as I'm concerned personally, I have the highest regard for our NRIs, and they're doing a tremendous job, as Ambassador Kapoor correctly said, and contributing a lot to their economy as well as to the Indian economy. In my case, of course, I'd like to say I've never been tempted to live abroad. I've always felt that India is my natural home. I would not feel at home in any other country, so I've never been tempted to live abroad. But I can understand people who have gone there, and I understand the contribution they are making. Having said that, Megha, I'd like to agree with Ambassador Kapoor, but at the same time saluting Pratikrit for coming back when he could have, with his skills, easily stayed on and become a citizen of the country where he was. The fact is that we have plenty of young people, as you correctly pointed out. This is a huge demographic dividend for us, and if we send our young people across the world, 10, 20 million of them, by the way, we can afford to send even 15, 20 million. We have that many, young people, potentially highly talented, and you send them abroad and they do well. Well, I can tell you, more than 90% will do well. They will make contributions to their economy and bring up the reputation of India, especially a resurgent India under Prime Minister Modi. At the same time, they'll make a very significant contribution to India. PM Modi has always placed a lot of emphasis on NRIs. Wherever he goes abroad, he meets the NRIs first. And I think NRIs have played a very, very important role. So yes, Megha, I wouldn't call it a brain drain. I would call it, frankly, we have the brains and let's share the brains. Thank you, Megha.
Okay, all right. Then Rupinder Sachdev, how do we, now if we are being asked to take back the population that travels to all these countries, immigrates to the West, but the educational level, it's only the white collar jobs that are at this point of time getting the Americans or the British or the Australians or the Canadians the idea that they need to be withheld into their respective countries, versus those who may be from the labor class, jobs that do not require a lot of skill, is something the West is also not looking at attracting and allowing into their countries. Now, then what should be the alternative? There is always going to be a certain percentage of Indians that would want to travel abroad, that would want to live outside of the country, and that's not a problem at all. But if we have more and more of these people who stay within the country, do we have, like I said, the resources to keep them, to give them jobs, I don't know, even to skill them to the level that is going to be at par with the kind of employment that kind of skill that is required for employment to be had?
Megha, I think you should be asking this question of Prime Minister Modi. That's the question the poor guy is dealing with, right? But yes, it's a challenge. And honestly, we do not have the opportunities. You look at, anecdotes of a government job. Forget, okay, government jobs are, sought after because they're permanent, but forget, the lowest of a government job attracts, for 100 job, maybe there are 100,000 applicants. Where are the jobs? Okay, there are jobs, they will come. I'm talking of a particular segment also, right? And as you said, of the hundreds of resumes that you get of those who've done their bachelor's and master's, how many of them, one, maybe you need, whatever, and how many of them are skilled enough, capable enough that you would want to hire? There's a huge gap, but that's a challenge which, definitely India's growing economy, India's growing private sector, and all of that, and entrepreneurial spirit would, kind of generate. But that said, there are enough numbers in this country, or in any country actually, who could be looking at opportunities in other countries. Now, therein, yes, as discussed, I think there are three kinds of categories. One is the professionals, the educated, etc., the talent which all these countries want. Okay, they may be looking at lesser numbers, but that's the talent they want. The other is, again, not the lowest of the labor, but the like the paramedics, the construction workers, etc., which all of them want. Okay. Needed as per their needs. And lastly, there is a category, let's be clear, there are hundreds of thousands of illegals going out from India at any cost. The southern border of the US, the Mexican border, there's that Darien Gap, or I forget that exact name, a very dangerous trek through Panama and all. Over 100,000 Indians are stuck there on the border. I think that's one number, maybe even more. So there are all kinds of, various kinds of folks who are, going out or, living there or coming back, etc. But it's the upper two categories which are more of need and which countries want to attract. But even then, they don't want the numbers the high numbers. They want the numbers according to their own calibrations of what they need. So the challenge is for India, without doubt, for us to be having the jobs. But the question is that, even industry, you cannot plan out. The nature of the economy and the markets has become such. I mean, if you get a Toyota manufacturing car plant in India or a Tesla car manufacturing plant in India, it's a $10 billion FDI, yes. But how many employees? Okay. Maybe not even 100. So that's the challenge.
Okay, all right. But Pathik, quickly a response from you. And I'm going to speak about, the conundrum Indians face. And here you had the government wanting to have, lateral entry into government jobs, into the UPSC lateral entry, and that became quite the controversy, and the government had to roll it back. And this was also, if it had been implemented, there would be a number of individuals from the private sector who would have been given the opportunity to take those government jobs. Do these policies, and because of political compulsions, when these policies have to be changed or altered, also then impacts the morale of the people within the country, of the youth within the country?
First of all, I mean no disrespect to the NRIs. I respect them. Secondly, see, when you have the third largest ecosystem for startups in the world today in India, that means the brains are no more in the drain. It has evolved. We need to understand one thing. The obsession with the government job is a cultural issue in this country. There is a small section which is completely into government jobs. They don't want to look into anything else. Even if they get a grade 4 peon job, they will stick to, hook onto it. That culture has to change. At the same time, we must understand there are 8 crore people in this country who took a mudra loan and became an entrepreneur on themselves. There are 6 crore MSME enterprises in this country. They may be very small, but they are doing it. They are not looking for a government job. And I can tell you, irrespective of whether you want to stay back in India or you want to go abroad, you need to develop those skill sets. The problem, Megha, is this. There is a section which believes and thinks that just because I am going abroad, I will instantly become a millionaire. They don't want to go through the churning, neither they are going through the skill development. And that's where they are the first to get, kicked out when there are restrictions coming on visa. So fundamentally, I agree with what the other panelists said. You have to work on your skill.
The fact that's quite the contrast, because when a person from Punjab decides to go to Canada or United Kingdom, he knows exactly what he has signed up for. He knows that he will have to work in these fast food restaurants, he will have to serve, he'll have to act as a, perform as a waiter, drive cars, and drive cabs and so on and so forth, do these menial jobs, but he's signed up for it, and he's more than happy to take it up, because the opportunities, unfortunately, that are available in his village, in Punjab or any part of India are so abysmal that other option, it may be a lowly job, but the other option seems to be brighter and more attractive.
Well, if he gets a BTech degree in Canada and then wants to work as a waiter, he starts with that. That's his choice. And eventually, what we forget is the number of people who are coming back every year because of the disillusionment abroad. That is the number we don't count. Secondly, Punjab again is the same state which has the largest number of Mercedes and high-end cars being sold every year. So a state which has a tremendous entrepreneurial culture. Punjabis are respected for their hard work. If that state today is in a declining mood because everyone wants to take the first flight abroad, then I am sorry.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.